Hollywood has done it again. They've made another sequel to a decades-old classic movie. First we had Beetlejuice, and now we have Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. I wonder what they're gonna name the third movie. So, it's been 36 years since the release of the first Beetlejuice. 36 years. That's way before I was born. The interesting thing is that Warner Brothers have actually been trying to make a Beetlejuice sequel for decades, at one point even offering it to Kevin Smith to rewrite. What was it called again?
Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian. To which I was like, really, didn't we say all we needed to say with the first Beetlejuice? Must we go tropical?
Nope, but since it's Hollywood, we gotta go number 2. So, how was Beetlejuice Beetlejuice? Was the 36-year wait worth the wait? We're about to find out. Let the battle commence. Now the gothic designs, the cinematography, the practical effects, it was absolutely enchanting in the first Beetlejuice. Some of the effects looked obviously fake, but it all adds to the charm that Tim Burton's movies have. It's like you're at a haunted house, complete with all the animatronics and creepy lighting that you would expect. And in the day and age we live in now, where everything is CGI, I was afraid that the second movie would lose all that charm from the first film. And surprisingly, it doesn't. I know. The movie uses tons of practical effects. This includes animatronics, puppets, sets, even some of its body horror. It does use CGI when it needs to, but even then, it still embraces the look and textures of the practical effects from the '88 movie. And all around, the CGI and practical effects all looked very consistent. And whereas at first I was concerned, I ended up really enjoying my return to the world of Beetlejuice. It really was wonderful in this day and age where everything is done in the computer to go back to some good old-fashioned practical effects with a ton of old-school filmmaking techniques. And I had so much fun with the visual element of both movies. And I knew it looked great in the first film, but I was especially surprised at how great it all looked in the second film. In fact, the movie even had some of the grain and tiny flickering that you would get with movies that are shot on film. So I wouldn't be surprised if this movie was shot on film to further replicate the look of the original movie. So the tone and atmosphere were equally fantastic in both films, which is especially a compliment for Beetlejuice 2, as most modern movies fail to replicate the look of their older counterparts. In terms of which movie does it better, I would say that both films are evenly matched, but I would actually have to give the edge to the second movie. The main reason being that I liked the world in the first Beetlejuice, but Beetlejuice 2 made me love it. And when the movie was over, I actually wanted to see more of this world, and for that reason alone, I didn't want the movie to end, and I just wanted more. So the movie with superior atmosphere and world building is Beetlejuice 2. The story for Beetlejuice 1 is very simple. This married couple die and turn into ghosts. Much to their dismay, people move into their house once they die. So they try to haunt and scare them away, only to find that they can't seem to scare them off. On the contrary, this only makes the new people want to interact with them. So the married couple invoke the help of Beetlejuice, and things get very bad for everyone when he gets involved. And the story for Beetlejuice Beetlejuice is that Lydia Dietz is dealing with the death of her father. Her daughter Astrid, though, is estranged from her mother, and there is tension between the two throughout the movie. In the middle of all this, we also have her annoying love interest slash manager who is forcing himself into the family. Meanwhile, Astrid is befriending this boy that she meets. Simultaneously, Beetlejuice finds out that the Dietz family are back in town and wants to get himself involved, when suddenly his evil ex returns to get revenge on him for something he did to her years ago, and she has the ability to suck people's souls, kinda like Nocturna from Batman Caped Crusader. And then Willem Dafoe plays a detective, I think, who's not a detective but an actor, who is investigating the murder of her victims. Yeah, I'm gonna stop right there. The story for Beetlejuice 2 is all over the place, which is bizarre because you'll notice how simple the story was for the first movie. The first film was able to take advantage of its simple story and give the one plot point its due. The second film introduces so many plot points, but then doesn't have the time to focus on them because it then introduces even more plot points and needs to focus on those. So the movie constantly dismisses previous plot points to make way for new ones. Beetlejuice Beetlejuice is just so overstuffed with plots and subplots that it never gets to stop and take its time with any of them. And plot points that you think are going to be very important just end up getting resolved as if they were insignificant and unimportant. Which begs the question, why did it spend so much time building them up and giving them a big reveal if they were just gonna throw them to the wayside later? The structure of the script for Beetlejuice 2 is one of the worst structures I have ever seen, and I think I have nailed down the problem. The first movie was very clearly written as a movie. The plot point of the married couple wanting to get these people out of their house and then turning to Beetlejuice to make it happen was very easy to follow. But Beetlejuice 2's script feels like it was written for a TV show. It introduces so many ideas, so many new characters, so many plot points and subplots, and it just feels like these were ideas that were meant for a 10-episode TV series rather than an hour and 40-minute movie. And I know just the people to blame for this. The writers. Now you might be thinking, well, no shit, of course it's the writers, but no, it goes a little deeper than that. The writers for Beetlejuice Beetlejuice are the same writers for Smallville and Wednesday, and the big mistake they made is that they plotted out the script as if they were writing another TV series, and that one big mistake is what ruined the script for this movie. It needed movie writers, not TV writers. It just desperately wants to throw so much story at you, but it has no time to flesh any of it out. So as soon as you think you are going to get into one story, it immediately has to stop and move on to the other. Here's what I would have done. I would have kept the villain who is coming after Beetlejuice, the death of the father, and the boy who takes Jenna Ortega's character into the afterlife. And then I would have thrown everything else out. That would have been enough, and it would have brought all the original characters back into the fold and set them on their journey. But all this other crap, it was just bloating the story to the point that the film just couldn't keep up. So the movie with the superior story is the first Beetlejuice. Now in the first movie, our main characters are Adam and Barbara, played by Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis, and Lydia, played by Winona Ryder. And both Adam and Barbara can't be seen by the living, but Lydia has the ability to see ghosts and is able to interact with them. And these are good main characters. They're not deep or anything, but they are very likable. And a nice touch is that as much as this married couple want to scare the family out of their house, they are very friendly with Lydia, and this relationship is what carries a good chunk of the movie. The rest of the family are fun, quirky characters, but they are not the focus. For most of the film, they're kind of in the background, until they get more involved in the climax. Now, Winona Ryder and Catherine O'Hara's characters returned from the first movie, and they were great. In fact, I was really surprised at how good Winona Ryder was in this, and the way she interacts with her daughter Astrid, played by Jenna Ortega, was really good as well. I liked how Lydia believed in ghosts as a kid, and her daughter doesn't. It may be a simple switch around, but I liked it. But even then, Astrid starts getting the ability to see ghosts like her mother, and they never bring that up again. They don't even have a discussion about it. And that was another problem with the bloated script. The characters don't have time to discuss all this stuff. That said, I still found the characters to be very likable. I like how Astrid sees through people's fake intentions, as well as the feud she has with her mother. The reason I really enjoyed this is because there are moments where they are civil with each other, and I found that to add a bit more nuance to their relationship, which is something that you don't usually get with estranged relationships like this between kids and their parents. And that's about it. On paper, these characters aren't really much, but like with many of Tim Burton's movies, it's the actors that bring the rest of their identity to them. And I thought all the actors did an incredible job. Jenna Ortega did a very good job too, and I am so relieved that they didn't just make her play Wednesday again. And I even liked the relationship between Winona Ryder and Catherine O'Hara. The two barely interacted in the first movie, but it was nice to see that they had gotten closer in this film, especially considering that Catherine O'Hara is playing her stepmother, and typically those relationships in films are predictably negative. And here it can be negative too, as Dahlia does seem to enjoy that Astrid is treating her mother poorly. She sees it as a full circle kind of moment. But she also tells Astrid to take it easy on her mother too, and the two even talk about motherhood as well. So I really liked the relationship between these three characters. Now in the first movie, there was just the right amount of characters and they all had the perfect amount of screen time. In Beetlejuice 2, however, there are so many characters and the movie doesn't have enough time to accommodate all of them. For example, we all know that Willem Dafoe is a great actor and he's great in this movie too. He is a detective, but this is where his performance got all confused. He is supposed to be an actor turned detective, and his quirk is that he treats all his detective work like a performance. So he constantly reads his lines and always wants to get his cop entrances right. And that was majorly disappointing to me, because whenever he is playing the straight character, he is doing a fantastic job. But whenever he started reading lines or the movie started making jokes about his acting persona, I thought his character just became too goofy, and I just couldn't take him or the situation seriously anymore. And I really would have preferred if he had just played the character character serious. I think it would have provided more tension in the film for Beetlejuice, and it also would expand the world and show that it's not just goofy everywhere you look, and that it has some dark corners to it as well. And I think that contrast is important. But in the end, I felt that he was wasted and didn't have much to do. This goes back to the problem with the script being overstuffed. Speaking of overstuffed, we have Monica Bellucci, who is the villain of the movie. Now, giving Beetlejuice a villain of his own, someone that he is scared of, is a great idea, as in the first movie, nothing seemed to faze him, other than his own name of course.
Beetlejuice!
But again, the movie doesn't have time to develop this villain, so she shows up in her introduction scene, and then she disappears for the rest of the movie, making only tiny micro appearances, and then showing up for the climax where she doesn't get to do anything. I thought this was also a completely wasted character, to the point that I question why they even put her in the movie in the first place. And what's worse is that you could have written out these two characters and the movie wouldn't have been any different. The same with Rory, played by Justin Theroux. This character is such a pathetic freak and a big sissy, and it's all made clear what his intentions are later, but even so, if you cut him out of the movie, it wouldn't have made any difference to the plot. If anything, it would have given the other characters and plot points some much needed focus. So I liked the characters in both movies, and I honestly think that the characters have more depth to them in the second movie, but there is just too much untapped potential, and whenever you find an interesting character storyline, it very quickly gets tossed out, and I found that to be very frustrating. So in many ways, I actually liked the characters more in Beetlejuice 2, but in the end, the characters in the first Beetlejuice spared no expense. They were given simple character arcs, and the movie maintained focus on them from the beginning to the very end, and there were just the right amount. That being said though, I know this goes against everything I just said, but I did end up slightly preferring the characters in Beetlejuice 2 over the first movie. Honestly, I found them to be very nice and pleasant to be around. Tim Burton's characters usually have a knack for being gothic and oddballs.
I could live here.
But in this movie, they felt like oddballs, but they were much more charming oddballs. Oddballs who had matured, and I really enjoyed being in their company, and I liked how they had real life problems. So even though analytically, the characters were better in the first movie, on a fun level, I actually found them to be more enjoyable in the second movie. So yeah, I'm very surprised by what I'm about to say, but the movie with the superior characters is Beetlejuice 2. Now we all know Beetlejuice. He's a character who's vindictive, disgusting, and hilarious all at the same time. And I always found this performance interesting, because to me, this is the closest Michael Keaton has gotten to playing the Joker. And that's what I always think whenever I see him in this role, and he is so entertaining to watch, with a lot of his performance actually being improvised. And as for his return in the second movie, I gotta say, 35 years later, and he was just as awesome now as he was back then. I was really surprised at how good he was in the second movie. He really was just as good, if not better, than he was in the first movie. This is even more impressive when you take into account that Michael Keaton is 73, and his age never gets in the way. Throughout the film, he gives this wacky and energetic performance, and I never once thought that he had gotten too old. He surprisingly is able to pull it all off so well, and the idea of him teaming up with Lydia was actually really fun, and a very pleasant surprise. Beetlejuice also gets a little backstory as to how he died, and I actually really liked it. It was dark and twisted, but also really funny. Now on paper, the backstory was very thin, but Michael Keaton's performance really sells you on it, and he actually had much more screen time in this movie than he did in the first one. And man, if they make a sequel, I want to see him play this character again. He hasn't lost a beat at all. So for the first time ever in these versus videos, I am actually going to give this round a tie, because Keaton's performance in both movies is so consistent that I actually thought he was equally as good in Beetlejuice 2 as he was in the first movie. Beetlejuice 1 is very simple and straightforward, whereas Beetlejuice 2 is a mess, but an entertaining mess. I like plenty of elements in the second movie, but it just doesn't all come together. Especially when you get to the climax, which is quite frankly where I thought the whole movie completely fell apart. There were also too many musical numbers in Beetlejuice 2. A couple of them were fine, but the rest were ridiculous and felt completely off tone with the style that Beetlejuice is known for. The climax just consisted of a very long song number and then a copy and paste of the first film's final action crescendo, and that's it. Threat averted. it was incredibly unfulfilling. The jam-packed story made for a frustrating narrative, and that ending, I don't know what that was supposed to be. This movie is a prime example of less would have been more, but instead, it decided to throw as much stuff at the wall as it could, and a lot of it didn't stick. The first Beetlejuice is a movie that I didn't really like the first time I saw it, and I thought it was overrated. But I have seen it a couple times since, including in preparation for this review, and with each subsequent viewing, I've been warming up to it more and more. A big reason why is because, like most of Burton's movies, it's a simple story with simple characters, but a very inspired and unique visual style, and a world that you could only get from Tim Burton. And the movie took really good advantage of its concept. That being said, the second movie did add to this world. I thought the world building was superior to the first movie, the characters had a different style and charm to them, Beetlejuice was equally as fun, and despite its bloated script and wasted characters, I still had a lot of fun with the good stuff. So as much as I think this movie gets wrong, I would be lying if I said I didn't have a good time during a lot of it. There was a good amount of enjoyment to be had with Beetlejuice 2. If only it focused on the good stuff and threw away all the bloat, then we could have had a much stronger movie here. It's time for the scores. Beetlejuice gets a 7 out of 10, and Beetlejuice Beetlejuice gets a low 6. If that climax and ending was stronger, then the film could have gotten a high 7 or even an 8, but that's unfortunately not the case. The climax was weak, the villain pops up for the climax only to stand in one spot and die, and then we get one of the strangest endings I've seen for a movie all year. And was this a mistake that made it in? They're dancing against their will and completely confused throughout the song, but then in this one shot, Jenna Ortega has a big smile on her face. It's like she broke during this take and they decided to keep it in for some reason. Anyway, Beetlejuice 2 had some good stuff going for it, but is ultimately bogged down by a mess of ideas that didn't come together in the end. The first movie, on the other hand, had a ton of ideas, but was able to support it with a simple and structured story, and that made for a much more well put together, enjoyable, and all round, much more satisfying film. A huge thanks to my patrons for all the support. If anyone else wants to have their name featured in the credits, as well as gain access to trailer reactions, early access videos, game shows, and so much more, then head on over to my Patreon and become a member. The prices start at as little as $1, and your patronage will help support the channel and allow me to do what I love full time. And if you don't want to use Patreon, then that's fine. You can hit the join button below and become a YouTube member instead. If that still does not interest you, then please do like and share this video, and feel free to hit that subscribe button, as I would love to have you as a member of the channel. Thanks very much as always for watching, everyone, and I will catch all of you very soon. Take care.